With Crozius and Aquila, the short scratching of the stylus whispered across the data slate, the soft glow of a lumen globe casting pale shadows across Wulfgar's scarred features. Outside, thunder rolled gently over the cloud banks, muffled and distant. Deacon Absalon, standing at the tall window with his hands behind his back, glanced upward toward the thin clouds curling along the mountainside. He made a soft grunt, as if at a passing thought. "I didn't think we were due for a storm," he murmured. Wulfgar, hunched at the end of the long wooden table, dipped his stylus into the ink bottle and replied with a tired sigh, "It's NihtWyrtha, brother Deacon. It rains all the time." Absalon turned, one brow raised. "You are a sullen one today." Wulfgar placed down his writing implement and rubbed his temple. Space Marines do not sleep, not truly. A few hours of meditation usually sufficed for his altered physiology, but this day he felt every year of his age. The long dark winters of NihtWyrtha pressed into his bones, and organizing a chapter from near nothing, with limited resources, limited time, and limited patience, was somehow more exhausting than a month-long siege against an endless tide of Xenos. He was not alone in the effort. Tiberius had been invaluable in coordinating the forges to begin production of Astartes pattern STC. Voratrix, in her own elusive way, conjured supplies the Adeptus Ministorum claimed were impossible to deliver, and Emperor Neuhau had even produced an STC pattern for a dreadnought. Wulfgar had long since decided not to ask how she acquired it. Osric had proven enthusiastic and full of ideas, particularly for armor designs. Godric, though a consistent irritant, was oddly helpful when it came to erecting new bastions and repurposing old defenses. Brother Nathaniel, on the other hand, had grown increasingly obstructive, raising concerns and delays regarding the preparation of NihtWyrthan candidates for post-human enhancement. Still, Wulfgar trusted the apothecary would work it out in the end. And then there was Absalon, his greatest aid. The deacon's simplicity of thought made insurmountable problems seem manageable. He had personally drafted the first list of prospective recruits, though they were still years away from trials, let alone implantation. Their Geneseed stock was still being collected from across what remained of the chapter, scattered to the stars during the Nova Terra interregnum. That delay, too, wore on him. Word had come from Mentis that he would attempt to hurry the process along. Wulfgar did not find that comforting. The words "hurry" and "founding a chapter" should never appear on the same page, let alone the same sentence. Absalon turned from the windows and picked the parchment from the desk. "Supply request fast cruiser Stormwield," he stated, reading the heading, then looked through the notations. "Primary reactor shielding, Sarathar pattern, requires redesign. Current units overheating at 23.1% power draw. Recommend replacing exhaust manifolds or inventing new physics." Absalon laughed. That sounded like Magos Doctora Cogitatis Tiberius. Next entry, synthetic ration stock, Castell origin, contaminated or possibly fermented into a new species. Suggest incineration, possibly ritual. Clearly Brother Nathaniel had been involved in that one. Deck 6, coffee unit offline. Machine has been reported screaming in binaric. He smiled. Archmagus Damia Voratrix had clearly been trying to help again. Captain's chair, auditory integrity compromised. Emits a squeak described by crew as haunting or taunting with malice. Clearly an observation of Brother Osric. He scanned down the parchment. Quad macro turret 4 aft. Fire arc limited to rear only. Reactor housing obstructs arc due to unforeseen growth in final assembly. Deacon Absalon had no idea what any of that meant, but it did not sound good. Next part read, "Missing crewman, still unaccounted for, believed to have been devoured by coolant system octopus stowaway, requesting mechanical filtration and Xenos warding rights for water systems." Ah, thought the deacon. The octopus problem was a well-known issue for Fiskballa due to an earlier incident. Wulfgar let out a sigh as the priest read and rubbed at the bridge of his nose. The absurdity of the problems only made them more frustrating. "The crew's begun naming the octopus," Wulfgar told him. Absalon's head tilted slightly. "Have they?" "Horus, apparently, or Erastus. Depends who you ask," Absalon grunted. "As long as they don't start worshipping it, it's not really my place to judge." Wulfgar tapped the data slate with the stylus. "We built a ship that can outrun a Drukhari raid pack, but it can't brew coffee or aim its secondary guns forward. That's what happens when you build a battleship across 4 forges with a logic deficit and a common hatred of standardization. It was built to symbolize unity, said Absalon, or so Lady Voratrix stated. It symbolizes modular nonsense and a lack of chair grease, replied Wulfgar, a soft chuckle from the deacon. Then, silence. Wulfgar looked up. Absalon hadn't moved, but his shoulders had stiffened. One hand lifted slightly, pointing through the window. I thought... It's too early for Aefenlang, he said, voice low. Wulfgar stood and stepped to his side. Outside, the sky was lit by the red glow of Aefenlang, but it was still a month away. As they watched, clouds had parted not with light, but with a faint, pulsing glow, pink and glimmering like silk catching fire. At first it was beautiful. Something inside Wulfgar's bones stirred, that old sensation from the war, the wrongness that came before impact. He reached for his vox, but the channel was nothing but screaming. Outside, a flash of pink light fell like a stone onto the main island in the direction of the capital hold of Soothihil, a soundless detonation and afterglow of detonation. Orbital bombardment, shouted Wulfgar as he grabbed his skull helm and raced for the door. At that moment, the whole structure of NihtWyrtha shuddered with an ear-splitting scream and explosion. Wulfgar turned back and grabbed the deacon, pulling him from the window as the long barrel of the fortress monastery orbital lance battery fell past the aperture, burning in pink plasma fire. Both men crashed to the floor as debris fell from the ceiling, Wulfgar shielding the priest from the blast. The whining sound of the fortress monastery reactors powering up filled the room, making the floor vibrate. Alarms and sirens began to wail. Outside, the flicker of the void shield flashed, blinked, and snapped off. The dull sliding thud of huge metal canisters of one of the remaining 3 orbital defense lasers was heard to draw back, ready to fire, followed by a second huge explosion. The room shook again. More masonry fell from the upper parts of the monastery. Wulfgar picked up the deacon and ran for the invasion bunker. As they ran, the monastery shook as more impacts slammed into the structure above. The sounds of gunfire from outside in the direction of the main gates confused Wulfgar, pushed the priest into the lower halls towards the bunkers and armories, then ran back to the main gate. He had no idea what was going on, or how an enemy could have crossed the mile-long bridge to reach as far as the gatehouse in such a short time. Wulfgar sprinted down the length of the fortress monastery's high hall, the banners of NihtWyrtha flapping in the storm wind behind him. Thunder echoed, not from the sky, but from the falling macro shells of their own defenses turned traitor. 2 iron hands stood braced at the wicket gate fire slits, bolters thudding against the mass beyond. Above them, red-armored chapter serfs manned the crenellated gatehouse, pouring fire from the murder holes above. "Why are the gates closed?" Wulfgar bellowed. One of the Astartes turned, his black Monk 3 plate scarred from battle. The serfs shrank at the sight of Wulfgar's approach, bowing as though his sheer presence might smite them. "Lord Chaplain, the bridge has fallen. The enemy is at the gates." Wulfgar snarled and slammed the skull-faced helm onto his head. "Of course they are. You closed the gates." He swung his Crozius Arcanum toward the winch mechanic, who cowered like a whipped hound. "Open them," another iron hand shouted. "But Lord, if we do, they'll breach the fortress." Wulfgar's helm turned, glowing green lenses locking on the speaker. "Do you know whose skull is on my faceplate, worm?" The Astartes fell to one knee. "The Emperor's, Lord." Wulfgar nodded once. "Correct, and it's not for your benefit, it's for theirs." He pointed at the gates at the invisible enemy. "And it's Scop Wulfgar now. Open my gates." The winch screeched. Chain links groaned. The gates opened slowly, revealing deep gouges clawed through steel plate. Beyond, the foe waited. A horde of Slaneshi demons, lithe and twisted, quivered behind a monstrous figure. A demon prince, bull-headed and crowned with burning brass horns, wielding a blade longer than a man was tall. The beast laughed, a sound like molten bells, and lifted its blade. Wulfgar charged. The blade carved the stone slabs behind him as he surged past, cloak torn in its wake. Wulfgar slammed his Crozius into the demon's knee, shattering flesh and splintering warp bone. The creature fell, bellowing rage and confusion, its strength robbed in a single blow. He didn't stop. He spun, backhanding the Crozius into its spine, the golden head erupting with light as vertebrae split. The demon howled, slumping forward. Wulfgar drew his power sword. One clean stroke. The beast's head fell, horns clattering against the stone. He caught it before it hit the ground, half the size of his body, and lifted it high. "This," he roared, "is how you deal with daemons." Then he threw it. The severed head struck the first rank of daemonettes, who reeled back in a ripple of fear and disgust. Some gasped, others snarled. Wulfgar drew breath. "For the Emperor!" And with a howl that shook the gatehouse, he charged again, crashing into the demon horde like a storm given flesh. The three Astartes beside Wulfgar took firing stances without a word, bolters barking into the demon horde. A moment later, Chapter Serfs surged forward, adding last fire and autogun bursts to the volley. From above, someone had managed to drag an autocannon to a fortified perch. Its shells ripped across the Hlaford's Way bridge, shredding the tightly packed enemy like wheat before a thresher. The daemons of Slaanesh were made for speed and grace, but here, trapped on the narrow stone causeway, they were little more than targets in a firing lane. Wulfgar marched into them. His Crozius Arcanum swung wide, glowing golden arcs carving through warp flesh. One beast, shaped like a horse with skin like silk, leapt at him. He sheared off its forelegs in a single swing. As it screamed, tongue lashing wildly, Wulfgar grabbed the tongue and used it as a flail, battering aside more of its kin before flinging the creature into the raging sea below. He laughed. "He who is born under the Emperor's grace knows duty," he intoned, voice amplified by his helm's vox. A daemonette lunged for his pauldron, claws sparking off ceramite. He crushed her underfoot and drove the Crozius through her chest. "He who is born outside the Emperor's grace shall know redemption." Another beast, two-legged, neck stretched like a serpent, pounced upon one of the iron hands. Wulfgar caught its tail mid-lunge, swung it into a cluster of its kin, then brought his Crozius down in a single blow to finish it and its rider both. "He who seeks redemption will be granted it," he bellowed, slamming another fiend into the bridge rail, "with seals of honor, or the blade." Further down the bridge, he saw smaller daemons being thrown off the sides into the sea, by their own kind. He paused. Strange, daemons did not retreat, he braced. "And he who flees from redemption," the host parted, and from the smoke and warp breath a great chariot emerged, baroque, shrieking, pulled by four warped beasts, crushing its own kin under spiked wheels. The shrill laughter of daemonettes echoed through the storm as they leapt clear, or died trying. Wulfgar tilted his head. "Who brings a chariot to a war?" He stood unmoving, his men at his side. The chapter serfs behind them faltered, the sight too much. "He who flees from redemption," Wulfgar said again, slower now, "will find solace under a rock before an imperial boot kicks it over." The chariot charged. One of the beasts lunged. Wulfgar slammed his Crozius into its skull, crushed it flat, then ran up its twitching spine, booted the rider in the face, and landed on the chariot deck. A whip-cracked daemonette shrieked and lashed for him. He caught her cords in a knot, ripped them from her grasp, and headbutted her, the impact cracking her jaw in 3 places. Then he crushed her with a backswing, her form imploding in purple fire. The chariot staggered. All 4 beasts were now dead. Wulfgar's 3 Astartes climbed aboard behind him. They turned the chariot into a mobile weapons platform. One iron hand unslung his flamer. He pulled the trigger. The flames roared. The daemons burned. A squad of chapter serfs surged past, forming a firing line and opening up with disciplined bursts. Bolts, autogun fire, and righteous cries filled the bridge. "For the Emperor," they roared. Wulfgar paused, half bemused. Where had that sudden courage come from? Then he heard the voice. "His sons, he sent to fight for you, and their sons stand with you. You are but 2 steps from the Emperor's golden hand. The heretic burns under his light, and you shall dispense it." "Deacon Absalon." Wulfgar turned, surprised. "I thought I led you to safety, and where in Terra's name did you get that armor?" Absalon stepped up to the battered chariot. In one hand he carried a massive eviscerator, clearly sized for an Astartes. But more striking was his appearance, layered chapter serf armor, draped in the robes of his old order, now tattered and singed. He looked halfway between a crusading preacher and a deranged battlefield prophet. Wulfgar's helm tilted. "Bolter and Aquila staff were your forte, were they not, Deacon? A chainsword's hardly your style, and that sermon, was it one of yours?" Absalom shrugged beneath the too heavy armor, patting the red breastplate. My apologies, Brother Scop. My vestments are in my chapel at Soothie Hill, and I hadn't expected to go to war this evening. I was planning evening service, maybe a quiet night of cataloging hymns. He hefted the blade. As for this, I found it in Brother Godric's arming rack. I'm sure he won't mind. A tech adept helped me suit up, and I'll have the red painted over once the moon stops trying to kill us. Wulfgar grunted. Godric will be glad to see it put to good use. The sermon? He pressed. Absalom shook his head. Not mine, I'm afraid. None seemed to fit, so I borrowed one from Archmaster Cardinal Abraxas. I like to think his soul won't mind. He was a fan of righteous flames and overwhelming force. Wulfgar chuckled. The daemons were breaking. Some hurled themselves from the bridge in confusion. Serfs advanced in tight formation, led by a black-armored Astartes calling orders through Vox. Lord, the voice crackled over Wulfgar's line. No word from orbit. Best estimate, Nithelm suffered a full daemon incursion. The seers are attempting a relay, but no luck. Archmagos Voratrix is missing, presumed dead. Absalom overheard and laughed. You'd be so lucky. If she's up there, any demon foolish enough to cross her will regret it. The Vox continued. We've received partial reports from the Capitol hold at Soothie Hill. Impact damage, multiple emergency requests for aid. We can't get a clear picture yet. Wulfgar stood quiet for a breath, then spoke calmly. Tell whoever's listening, the Emperor's angels are on their way. Absalom raised a brow. It's 70 leagues, Lord, as the crow flies. And if I recall correctly, the shuttle bay is on fire? Wulfgar stepped forward, Absalom followed. They passed the line of serfs holding the bridge. A stray daemonette lunged. Wulfgar batted it aside one-handed without slowing. We have sky hunters, he said, faint amusement in his voice. Absalom drove the eviscerator into the daemon's squirming form as it dissolved. Rather you than me, he said. A shrieking call screamed through the Voxnet, sending a stab of static pain into Wulfgar's ears. He reached to kill the tone override just as a garbled voice cut through. To all units receiving, this is Frigate Swalewisax. We are going down, broadcasting coordinates. I'm going to try and land her in the Emerald Sea. He was about to respond when the shadow passed overhead. The sky thundered as the Swalewisax tore above them, burning, bleeding fire and screaming like a wounded god. Trails of black smoke billowed behind her as hull plating peeled away, each metal slab falling like burning leaves. Horns blared. The frigate was so low it brushed the spires of NihtWyrtha, dwarfing the fortress monastery like a falling titan. She arced downward, vanishing over the cliffs. Then the sea parted. A sound like the world cracking in two filled the air as Swalewisax struck the ocean with the weight of a dead god. Water exploded skyward in a green and white tower of foam. A shockwave of spray blasted inland, flooding the coastline below the bridge, drowning thousands of daemons that had gathered for the final push. Wulfgar and Absalom stood frozen. Even the surviving daemons on the bridge faltered, stunned by the magnitude of it. Absalom opened his mouth to make some half-mocking comment, but Wulfgar's helm chimed a warning. A macro round, glowing pink, wrapped in flame, fell from the sky like a meteor. Down! Wulfgar bellowed, grabbing the deacon and pulling him behind the fallen chariot. The shell impacted. An entire span of the bridge vanished. Masonry vaporized. Stone melted. The sea below erupted again as the round tore through into the deeps. Daemon spawn exploded into being, but the tide crashing back inland took them before they could finish forming. The two men rose, soaked but alive, gazing down into the abyss. Neverborn flailed, confused and dissolving, pulled screaming back into the warp by the drowning embrace of the sea. Wulfgar scanned the far side of the gap. He saw one Astartes missing, but the rest and the chapter serfs had made it. A daemon tried to close from the inland side. He gunned it down without a word. Only a handful of daemons remained, those who had been on the bridge when the flood hit. And Wulfgar was, once again, the only true warrior between them and the mortal line. Then the roar of grave engines screamed overhead. 1, 2, 3 Skyhunter jet bikes arced over the chasm, landing hard on whining engines. The riders opened fire as they slid to a halt, bolters blazing, tearing into the daemons who broke instantly. Some evaporated on the spot, fleeing without even being wounded. Absalom lowered his eviscerator, flicking it off with a sputter of sacred oil mist. "It's going to be one of those days, isn't it?" he observed. Wulfgar holstered his pistol and placed a heavy hand on the deacon's shoulder. "It's only 11, he said. "Plenty of time for it to get far worse." The two men climbed onto the sky hunters, the deacon hanging on to an Astartes, clinging on tightly. He was truly wondering what a mistake it was to visit his old friend today. The 3 jet bikes shot off on the road to Suthi Hill. Wulfgar gripped the controls of the sky hunter jet bike tightly, the roaring winds tearing at the old banners tied to the shaft of his Crozius. Beside him, Deacon Absalon clung low to the saddle of his borrowed machine, his newly acquired eviscerator blade slung across his back, its teeth rattling with the vibrations. The two figures sped like storm wraiths across the broad hills and valleys of NihtWyrtha, the blackened countryside flashing past in a blur of gray and green. Above them, the skies were an angry smear of crimson and black, the aftermath of the orbital bombardments staining the heavens. Below, the land bore the wounds of battle, charred farmsteads, fields trampled into mud by the iron tread of war machines, and the smoldering wrecks of lighter civilian craft that had not fled in time. They tore past mustering points where the forces of NihtWyrtha gathered for war. Along ridges and in valleys, lines of heavy infantry formed, disciplined blocks of Wigathane soldiery in blue and crimson, their laslocks slung ready, their banners snapping sharply in the rising wind. Officers in iron helms barked orders, and every eye turned to watch as the chaplain and the deacon shot past. A symbol of hope, a sign that the Emperor's angels were already on the move. Still faster they rode, the twin contrails of their bikes cutting lines of white mist through the damp air. Past mobile repair columns, lumbering, beetle-like Mechanicus crawlers, past blacksmiths hammering out repairs on shattered armor, past priests anointing artillery crews with oil and chanting blessings into the very barrel breeches of macro cannons. Ahead, the true sight loomed, a great iron ring encircling the burning city of Suthi Hill. Dozens of tanks, old but serviceable Lehman Russes, Karabath-dropped siege engines, modified Sarathar pattern assault haulers, all arrayed in overlapping fields of fire. Their turrets swung slowly, tracking the burning breaches in the city walls, waiting for whatever foulness might come boiling out. Skitari maniples moved between them, hunched, red-robed cyborgs with glowing eyes and vox grills whispering coded prayers of extermination. Radium carbines and arc rifles glinted in the fitful light as they scanned the ruins for targets. Servo skulls drifted overhead like pale moons, trailing pennants of warning glyphs behind them. The 2 jet bikes sped across the perimeter without challenge, the Mechanicus units recognizing the identification sigils broadcast by Wulfgar's armor. A vox chorus of Binheric salutations whispered after them as they breached the inner circle and plunged toward the smoking heart of the city. Between ruined houses, across muddy riverbanks, past toppled statues and broken spires, they raced. Wulfgar's grim skull-faced helm lit by the glare of burning towers, Absalon riding at his side, his ecclesiastic robe fluttering behind him like a battle standard. In the distance, the church bells still rang, though their notes were broken and twisted by warp energies. Strange, flickering shadows played across the broken skyline, shapes too large, too many-limbed, to be anything but demonic. Wulfgar was about to open the region-wide Vox link, but stopped himself when he noticed an ident code flash up on his console. His heart missed a beat. He had not seen that sigil since the Itzical Binary 4 campaign, back when he had fought alongside Mentor Psychanamentus. The chief librarian had given him a look then that he had not understood at the time. Now, looking at the deacon beside him, he suspected he wore the same expression Mentus had worn all those decades ago. Absalon glanced at his own display, then at Wulfgar. His expression was one of confusion and fear, but he simply nodded, gripping tighter onto the controls. Both men jetted forward toward the burning city, the holy seals on their armor snapping and flapping in the slipstream. On their Skyhunters displays, the identification sigil flashed again, the stylized eye with skull, the inquisitorial rosette.